Hello again, everyone. How's it going? It's Anthony Gazenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I hope you are doing well and are prospering so far in the few short weeks of 2018, and hope everybody has been having a positive experience to start off the year. I know this is not necessarily the most busy time for the Cincinnati Bengals, given that they are out of the playoff hunt. And given that, we're now looking more towards March and April in terms of free agency and the draft. But there's still a lot going on this time of year for the Bengals, and more so than in previous seasons, mostly because of the coaching staff. We'll get to that. We're going to talk about how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals, continue that series, how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals in 2018 with something that I think might be a polarizing type of topic, I guess, in that series, as well as take your questions. Given the fact that this is January, we're going to take a lot of your questions. I'm flying solo tonight and fighting a bit of a cold again, but I'm here with you, and I appreciate you guys tuning in live. If you're not able to tune in live, as always, you can grab the show on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube. We're also on cincyjungle.com. All of our media is there, and you can subscribe to the aforementioned iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube accounts to make sure you get alerts of when we go live and when new media is available. We're also reachable to send your questions to via email, the obinsider at gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at BengalsOBI, and we appreciate that. So if you're in the live chat, if you got a question or two for the end of the program, let me know. And unfortunately, Scott Schultze couldn't quite make it this week, but that's okay. We're gonna he'll be back, and he'll be back next episode, and we'll be talking a lot more. And as I said, around the corner is free agency and the draft, so a lot to talk about, even though the Bengals season is over. I guess we'll just kind of run for now. I want to run down just some recent news and notes, at least since last episode, some things that have been occurring that I think are kind of just topical points and pretty interesting. The Bengals hired Frank Pollock. I think that had just come through right around the time we recorded last week. Frank Pollock, the former offensive line coach with the Dallas Cowboys, who obviously helped groom one of the best offensive lines in football. The Cowboys, as they sometimes do when they don't make the playoffs, and they are expected to, Jerry Jones makes some swift moves, and Pollock was not retained, so the Bengals quickly pounced on him. I thought that was a pretty good hire. The Pittsburgh Steelers lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars in Pittsburgh, and it was an exciting game. Jacksonville shot up to I believe it was a 21-0 lead at some point, and Pittsburgh climbed their way back, and Jacksonville held on. And with that, Bengals fans have been donating to Blake Bortles Foundation after they took down the Steelers. So kind of interesting there. Some other news and notes. Deshaun Williams, the defensive tackle, he signed a futures contract with the Denver Broncos. So he is no longer with the Cincinnati Bengals as of now. Now, obviously, the Bengals, if he gets waived or anything like that down the line, they could go after him. But for the second year in a row, the Broncos take a defensive tackle from the Bengals. They took D'Amato Pico last year, and then now Deshaun Williams this year. So kind of big news there. And then the Bengals are expected to get 4 compensatory picks in this year's draft. Now, I personally have never been big on the Bengals free agency strategy and how they retain or not retain some of their prime players in free agency. So, but they really value these extra picks. And now in the NFL, it started last year. Now teams can trade. They can include these compensatory picks in the trades. So here's what it looks like. And this is from the past couple of years so far. And this is according to Over the Cap. The Bengals are to get a third-round pick for Kevin Zeitler, They are to get a 5th-round pick for Andrew Whitworth, and these are because of guys they lost. They're going to get 2 7th-round picks for Margus Hunt and Carlos Dansby. To be honest, I'm pretty ignorant on how this formula works, and it's obviously based on snaps played, it's based on salary, all of that. To me, I mean, you look at Andrew Whitworth, who he was an All-Pro this year with the Rams. You would think that would net something higher than a 5th-round pick, but his average year salary is a little bit less than Kevin Zeitler, and his age is up there. And he didn't play. Kevin Zeitler played every single snap this year for the Cleveland Browns, whereas Andrew Whitworth only played about 88.8. So that factors into it. But a 3rd, a 5th, and 2 7th-round picks for the Bengals in terms of compensatory picks this year, and then obviously they have their own from other. Their same type of picks. And, so the 3rd-round pick obviously brings some interest, and especially now that the draft is right around the corner. So, it could be something that they use in a trade. I personally don't see that just because they don't normally trade up. But, Marvin Lewis has preached some changes, and, we'll see if maybe being a little more aggressive in free agency and the draft is going to be the way to go. The Bengals don't have as many big-time internal free agents set to hit the market. Obviously, there's A.J. McCarron and his restricted/unrestricted free agency status that's up in the air at this point. There's Chris Smith, a guy who produced a little bit in a rotational role for the Bengals, and some others. So, but none of the likes of Andrew Whitworth, Kevin Zeitler, people like that doesn't seem to be in the cards. So, that they should theoretically have more money to throw around in outside free agency. We'll see. Thanks again for all of you for joining us live. And if you have not read the details, you're going to be battling I'm battling a cough, so hopefully I don't do it too much on the air, so I'm trying to stifle it. But what I was going to say is, if you have not read up on these topics, you can read all of them on CincyJungle.com. There's a lot of details on there from folks like Jason Markham and others who have written these posts. A lot of good stuff there, and you can, like I said, you can read up on the compensatory picks, Deshaun Williams going to Denver, the coaching hires, all of that. And I urge you to do so because there's a lot of interesting stuff. But I wanted to kind of update you all on some of the happenings going on with the Bengals. We've started a series here over the past couple of weeks now, past couple of episodes, and I've kind of titled it "How to Fix the 2018 Bengals." So far, we've talked about being more proactive in free agency and the draft. We've talked about cleaning house with the coaching staff. That so far it kind of happened, but it kind of didn't. And some of it was on their own volition, some of it was not. And we talked about finding an identity for the team, whether it's ground and pound, bombs away, being a balanced team. Obviously this Bengals team has drafted a number of players, exciting players at skill positions, yet, John Ross, obviously major issues last year in his rookie season. Joe Mixon took a backseat for a while to other running backs. They draft they have 3 second-round running backs on the roster, yet they didn't do anything on the offensive line and let their 2 best offensive linemen leave. So you kind of have to say, what are we going to be and what are we going to do? So, and what I'm hoping is that these kind of all weave into each other. When you find an identity, that's when you get a little more aggressive in free agency in the draft and identify the players that you want, not necessarily always best player available regardless of position, but you say, we need this guy who's an offensive lineman, even though Mel Kiper Jr. says he's, not great value right here. This is a guy we like and fits what we want to do. and then obviously the coaching staff was a little bit of an anomaly in itself, but getting new coaches can help you find an identity. Getting Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator changes some things on that side of the football. Special teams coach Darren Simmons is staying, so I think that means that he's one of the better special teams coaches in the NFL. So Marvin Lewis has always valued special teams and is continuing to do so. And Bill Lazor, they're looking for continuity on the offense. They think maybe Andy Dalton can grow in under another year with Bill Lazor, and maybe they beef up that offensive line this year. New offensive line coach, and he has a prototype of guys that they like to draft. Luckily for him, the Cowboys really valued the offensive line in his tenure there and got Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, all kinds of, Tyron Smith was there. So, luckily for Frank Pollock, the Cowboys did that. Let's see if the Bengals do the same. And if they lean on him being from one of the prestigious franchises in the NFL and having one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, if they want to lean on him and that identity. So the other kind of side of the coin that I want to talk about in terms of finding an identity, the Cincinnati Bengals, whether we like it or not, whether they've had a very successful regular season to get them into the postseason or not, they have always kind of been, at least in the Marvin Lewis era, they have always kind of been, excuse me, the little brother to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously they play them 2 times a year. A couple of times under Marvin Lewis's tenure, they've played them 3 times a year for the playoffs. They continue to lose to them. They continue to lose in embarrassing fashion to them. And for the most part, I've said this on this program and many other platforms, they get what I like to call out-physicaled by the Steelers in a lot of different ways. Now, this last game where the Bengals had a good lead at halftime ended up squandering it. They they were as physical as the Steelers, but that is something that we don't normally see when these two teams meet. So my next thing in terms of fixing the Bengals, I almost want to see them get obsessed with creating themselves in a mold of the elite NFL teams and getting obsessed with all things Steelers. And what I mean by that is, obviously, you hear Marvin talk about championships and you talk about him, wanting to go further in the playoffs, but they also mention every year the goal is to win the AFC North. Well, more often than not, especially recently, this division has come down to the Bengals and the Steelers. The Ravens have been in there. Obviously, they won a recent Super Bowl. But the Bengals have had a bit of the Ravens' number lately. Obviously, the Browns have been totally out of the picture. And usually, the Steelers and the Bengals have been jockeying for the AFC North title. So, in order to get another AFC North title and in order to get through the AFC North, you would think that the Bengals want to build a team, and not totally, I guess, but you want to build a team that will go out there and you can beat the Steelers on any given day, any given primetime setting, whatever the case may be. You want to have enough talent. You want to match up with them well. You want to have the coaches and the scheme in place, and you want to have that identity that I spoke about. The Steelers are an interesting team. They seem to lose games you never expect them to lose. Twice to the Jaguars this year, and kudos to the Jaguars. They're a fun team. They're really good on defense. Blake Bortles, hey, he's got 2 playoff wins, so kudos to him. But there are flaws with the Jaguars, and most people thought, especially since Jacksonville came to Heinz Field twice this season and beat them twice, most people thought that in both occasions the Steelers should win that game. They did not. The Steelers are always good at rushing the passer. They're pretty stout against the run. They're not that great against the pass. They're okay. But on offense, they can do all kinds of different things. And they have a scheme designed for Le'Veon Bell to be successful. They have a scheme designed for Ben Roethlisberger to be successful. And usually that pays off again at the at the misfortune of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I would think that the Cincinnati Bengals, if they want to fix things in 2018, yes, they need to find an identity. Yes, we got to hope that they've identified the right coaches that have been plugged in certain areas. Yes, we want them to be more proactive in free agency in the draft. I would think, though, that because the Steelers are always atop the AFC North, even if the Ravens are in the picture as well, that the Bengals need to be borderline obsessed with all things Steelers and how to get past that team. Because usually, even if they win the AFC North, which has happened 2 different times where the Steelers were the wild card team, they end up playing Pittsburgh in the playoffs. So, and with the success, the continued success that the Patriots have, the Steelers have, and other teams have, you have to build a team to win your division, and you have to build a team to beat the best teams in the NFL. The Bengals, even in their best seasons, have not been able to beat the better teams, the playoff teams, the perennial winners in the NFL. Yeah, they've had a few nice wins here and there against the Steelers, against the Denver Broncos back in 2014 with Peyton Manning, and other wins that, you know, you can really say, hey, that, you know, quality win here. But I just think that that's a team that you consistently face, you consistently lose to, and is consistently at the top of your own division. And I'm not saying the Bengals need to play the same exact style of football as the Steelers, be Steelers West, I guess. But I think that the Bengals need to be aware and need to construct a roster that they think can play against guys like Antonio Brown, can play against that offensive line that seems to continue to manhandle the Bengals defensive line inexplicably, can continue to be able to exploit some of the weaknesses in the secondary of the Steelers. And it just, to me, and this goes back to a previous point, a lot of people say, you know, and it gets frustrating for national media pundits that cover the Bengals and us fans. A lot of people always say, you know, this is an insanely talented roster. How have they not won a playoff game? How have they not gotten to the Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, that sort of thing, with all of the talent they've amassed in the draft and all of that, and the wins that they've accumulated in the regular season. I get that, but I look back to the let's take the best player available in the draft and not necessarily have a role for them immediately, or not play a more talented younger player over a veteran. That's another issue altogether. But I think that it almost that the plan appears to be, you know, in the draft, you know, we've got some needs, but we're not going to overreach. We're not going to do that. We're going to take best player available, that sort of thing. There are times where, okay, John Ross, third receiver off the board last year, wide receiver was a need, speed was a need. So, you know, maybe that's more of a need instead of a best player available. But that plan, best player available, is almost a little bit like not really a plan, if you know what I mean. And when I say that, I'm talking about, you know, yeah, they've identified some players they like, and usually when you read Bengals.com and others, when, you know, they've interviewed Joe Mixon and they've interviewed certain guys, you can almost guarantee that there's a couple of guys they lock in on, and when you hear a name or two, those are players they tend to like. But again, not having a true identity and going best player available many times, you have a roster full of talented players, but you don't seem to really have a plan in place for them. And you don't seem to have something in place to say, this is what we do well, and this is how we're going to beat the Steelers in the NFL. This is how we're going to beat the Patriots. This is the type of team we are, and this is how we're going to match up against certain teams. It's almost like, let's just throw a bunch of talented guys on the field and or sit other talented guys and hope that talent wins over scheme, possible preparation, possible matchups, individual matchups, in between in-games matchups. So I would just like to see the team really have a focus of, in order to get to the Lombardi Trophy, you have to almost always bet, especially with Ben Roethlisberger behind center, with Tom Brady still playing quarterback, Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback. You have to almost always bet that you have to get through one, if not all of those types of teams. And the Bengals need to figure out a formula, a long-term vision, and a bit more of a theoretical plan and a bit more of a mapped out blueprint to say, this is how we are going to beat, this is how we're going to win the division, and this is how we plan to beat some of these elite teams. Now, obviously, you're not going to win every game of the year. I get it. The AFC North is one of, if not the toughest division in football. And I say tough not only to win it, but just tough in terms of grit and physicality and everything. But I just think that whether you want to absolutely mimic them, absolutely emulate them, or if you want to concoct a plan that says these are the players that will provide matchup nightmares for teams like the Steelers that we see every year, twice a year at least, for the Patriots, for some of these elite teams in the league, and that's how we can become an elite team. Get obsessed with becoming and getting past those types of teams, especially the Steelers, because they're in your own division, in your own backyard. And I think that is going to be something that they need to do in order to fix the team. I'd like to I'm looking at some of the comments here. Trade Andy for Blake Bortles, says John McIntosh. Yeah. Everybody, a lot of people are saying, Brandon Seaman and Tom Brooks and Rory P are all talking about offensive line, and I think that plays into both the last couple of ways to fix the Bengals that I mentioned. Finding an identity, and whether those offensive linemen allow you to pass the ball more effectively or whether they allow you to run the ball more effectively, hopefully both, but find an identity there. And also pass protect. The Bengals, even with Whitworth and Zeitler, weren't that great in 2016 protecting Andy Dalton. In 2017, they were one of the worst in the NFL at doing it. And, I mean, you got to get guys up front that can protect Andy Dalton. And in 2015, that was some of the best offensive line play we have seen from the Bengals in a long time. And obviously, Andy Dalton had the best year of his career, despite missing a handful of games. So I think that may be the first step towards finding an identity, getting past these elite teams, is building these offensive lines to get past them. And heck, you saw when Frank Pollock was in Dallas in 2016 with Dak Prescott and all of those big guys up front and Ezekiel Elliott, you saw what that line can do and how it turned those two guys into megastars. Now, granted, Ezekiel Elliott is very good. Dak Prescott was a lot better than a lot of people thought, but that offensive line really got them to be a dominant team in 2016. So, I'm with you guys about the offensive line and how that can play into all of these facets and the ways I've been extrapolating on how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals. I see a lot of questions. I'm going to get to those in just a minute. We appreciate all of the support you've shown this program. what do you think about how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals in 2018 and potentially they're being obsessed with the Steelers in order to be able to fix themselves? Is that accurate? Is that just way too much of reading into a rival? Or does it make sense? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We can be reached and or the program can be downloaded at iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can join us live on YouTube and Cincy Jungle every episode. And you can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. Again, I apologize for some of the sniffing and the coughing. I'm battling a cold here. Apologize about that. And unfortunately, I can't. When I'm flying solo, it's hard to mute it when someone else isn't talking. So apologize for that, and I appreciate you bearing with me. There are a number of questions I've seen here. A lot of them are draft draft questions. Here's one from Jeremy T. If McCarron becomes an unrestricted free agent, do we draft another quarterback? I absolutely think they do. Absolutely. Now, obviously, they seem to like Jeff Driscoll. There were some things that he did in the preseason that excited people. And athletic, but wasn't it, when you look at his numbers in college, it's not the type of stuff that, you know, I remember something Bill Parcells, well, part of what something Bill Parcells said, where there's some formula where in a college quarterback, you want to see them have at least over 60% completion percentage in their career, you know, a certain amount of touchdown to touchdown interception ratio and all of that. And if you look at Jeff Driscoll's numbers, it didn't really seem that way. And he bounced around from Florida to Louisiana Tech. And obviously there are ways the Bengals can develop him. I think, though, that the Cincinnati Bengals, especially if they are going to get, if they lose McCarron, then I think that has to be a big priority. Now, what round are we talking? I don't know. I think obviously it depends on who falls to them. I don't think, although this is a very quarterback-heavy draft and a lot of first-round talents in this draft, I don't think that they'll be using one at number 12. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I just don't. I don't see that necessarily happening. But I do think that probably a mid-round prospect is possible. Maybe that same area they drafted McCarron, and maybe it's a guy like McCarron who is a successful quarterback in college, has some perceived shortcomings, but is kind of a bigger name and a project type of guy. But yeah, I think and you've seen them issue trade offers from, you know, reportedly the Cleveland Browns, some lucrative trade offers in an effort to, you know, have a guy on the roster that can come in if Andy Dalton gets hurt and, you know, could potentially lead them to wins and not miss a beat. So I think that is something that they value, and I think they're going to continue to want to do that. I can't say exactly where they would draft one, but maybe a little higher than you think, especially if McCarron goes away there. That was from Jeremy T. Appreciate that question. Connor Williams, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson, or Orlando Brown at 12. I like Connor Williams, but I think there's been some injury issues there. That's from Brandon Seaman, that question, by the way. I do think offensive line needs to be either the first pick or the second pick. I think that we will probably see, unless the Bengals kind of shock us all, I think that we will probably see the Bengals go offensive line and linebacker in the first and second round, either way. For me right now, I'd like to see them get Roquan Smith. the linebacker out of Georgia, if he falls to them at 12, I'd like to see him there. I think he paired up with Vontaze Burfict and others would be a good pickup. And then there's a UCLA tackle. Name escapes me at the moment, but he should be there in the late first, early second. So he could be a guy that they look at the top of the second round. But yeah, obviously Connor Williams and Mike McGlinchey are two of the best in this year's draft. So you have to figure that those would be probably the picks at number 12 if the Bengals end up going offensive lineman. Now, there's some talk about safety and all of that. You have to figure the Bengals have some serious capital invested in the safety position between George Aloka and Sean Williams. Now, they both had a dip in play from 2016. They both had 3 interceptions each in 2016, 1 interception each this last year. So I see where there's maybe a need there, but I think that those are two well-paid players, and they're going to let them ride out some more of their contract before they move on. Let's see. That again was from Brandon Seaman. Thank you, Brandon. Oh, there was one other here. I liked this one. It was from Slingshot Gaming 911. Who agrees that Mike Brown has to be more aggressive when re-signing or adding more free agents? Cut the bad players that are not helping. Well, yeah, obviously that has to be in any owner's mindset. That has to be the case, and I think we all agree with that. I think where the talking point is here is that going to change? Is that truly going to change this year? And unfortunately, we won't know it until we see it. But you have Mike Brown still there, Katie Blackburn, Troy Blackburn, Marvin Lewis, Duke Tobin. You've got your 4 compensatory picks, which they value so much. I don't know. I don't know if I really I don't know the answer, but if you're to ask me right now, I don't see it changing. I really don't. I mean, maybe a little bit in terms of the free agency side, but I don't really see it changing all that much in terms of what they do in the draft. You have to look at it and say all their figureheads are still there. Everyone who has made these types of decisions are still there. You still have, and that's what worries me about, some people are liking the Marvin Lewis hire a little bit more as time is passing, especially now that he's added some different coaches, but you still have to understand this is a guy who is hesitant to play a lot of rookies. They take a backseat to a lot of veterans. I just don't, excuse me, I don't know what exactly, aside from a couple of coaching changes, I don't know exactly what's going to be different this year. I really don't. That question, of course, I think we would like to see. And when you look at the teams in the championship games, look at what the Philadelphia Eagles did and have done the past couple of years in free agency. Look at what the Jacksonville Jaguars have done in free agency the past couple of years. New England, the rich get richer there. I mean, they got Gillislee, Burkhead, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, the list goes on and on there. And then, Minnesota, they've built more so in the draft, but they've made some moves here and there. You have to supplement the draft with free agency, and you have to supplement it with quality free agency picks. And that's, I think, unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. And Mike Brown, it's almost, I've likened it a little bit to, a spurned lover, I guess. He got burned on the Antoine Odom thing. He got burned on the Lavernius Coles thing. He got burned a little bit on the Terrell Owens thing. And now it's kind of more bargain hunting. It's, get former big names who maybe used to be pretty good and either fell out of favor with a team or, what have you. I think that he needs to, Mike Brown, if he is the one who's truly making these types of decisions, he needs to kind of get over that. I mean, you need to get over it. And I see Sean Slaughter with a comment here. It's not how much you spend in free agency, it's how you spend it. Correct. That's totally correct. But Sean, when you let's look at the Jaguars, for instance. Calais Campbell, Malik Jackson, AJ Bouye, Barry Church, Tashawn Gibson. These are guys that they've added the past 2 seasons. The Bengals this year added Kevin Minter, and I mean, I mean, Chris Smith was a trade and he was okay, but Calais Campbell, All Pro, AJ Bouye, All Pro, other Malik Jackson, Pro Bowler this year. These are moves you need to make. Now the Bengals don't have that kind of space that the Jaguars had. I understand that, but if Philadelphia Eagles, Alshon Jeffrey, other Chris Long, other guys that re-signed Brandon Graham, you have to keep your core players and your best players, and you have to go out and add supplemental pieces and not pieces that, yes, Kevin Minter was a starter. Yes, Brandon LaFell has been a starter, but I agree. You don't want to sit here and be in salary cap hell, and that's the point I think that Sean is trying to make, and it's obviously a valid one. But you also don't want to keep wallowing in mediocrity, and you also, I think, to be honest with you, fans are already pretty lackadaisical, I guess is a nice way to put it. In terms of this team right now, 2 straight losing seasons. Marvin Lewis is back. They're not really enamored with what's going on with this team right now. And then if you hire the same people back, you hire Marvin back, all of a sudden you kind of go in your old ways in free agency. And not that you don't dictate how you operate necessarily on fans' wants and needs, but you do dictate some of what you do on ticket sales and everything like that. I think that you're going to lose a lot of fans if you sit around and don't really improve the team in free agency, whether it's at linebacker, offensive line, wide receiver, safety, whatever. You're going to lose more interest from the fans this year, and that's not good. But we'll see. I think they might be a little bit more proactive in free agency, but I don't expect massive changes. And unfortunately, there's this thing that the Bengals always talk about that I never hear any other team talk about, and that is this rookie surplus thing, this cushion that they have for the rookie pool. And they pump that out there. It's usually through Jeff Hobson, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because he's a good guy and he has to be kind of the megaphone of the team. But they put that out there with him, and no other team. I've never seen other teams, pump that out there to their fan base and to the public as to why they aren't getting starting caliber players in free agency. I don't understand it. So again, that's one of the changes, and thank you for that comment and question from another listener. I think there'll probably be slight changes, but as of now, I don't expect wide sweeping changes in terms of how they operate. We'll see. There are a number of different things they could do that would be massively changing how they've operated, whether it's drafting a quarterback in the first round, whether it's doing more in free agency, trading up to get more quality players and or needed positions in the draft, whatever the case may be. Those would be the major wide sweeping changes. I don't see really any of that happening, though, unfortunately. We'll see. Thanks for joining, guys. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter show. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate all the questions. Again, you can get in touch with the program on email, theobinsider@gmail.com, and Twitter @BengalsOBI. You can download the program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube, as well as get it on cincyjungle.com and get all of our material on all of those platforms. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I wasn't sure I was going to make it this week just because, like I said, Scott was not available tonight, and I, as you can hear, I'm still coughing and I'm under the weather. But appreciate you dealing with that. Hopefully, it's not too painful to listen to, and we'll be back next week and talking about a lot of different stuff, including how to fix the Bengals, and as always, taking your questions online. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.